Hello, everyone, and good afternoon. My name is Adriana Rodriguez, and I will be your presenter today. I am a licensed marriage and family therapist here at EAS, and I'm going to be doing a webinar presentation on communication skills for healthy relationships. I do want to let you all know that I will be giving a lot of additional information that is not on the slides, so I do recommend that you grab a pen and some paper to take notes as we go along. All right, let's go ahead and begin. So an overview about what I'll be covering today. I'm going to start with talking about what is communication and why is it so important. Then I'll go into the barriers to effective communication. I'll talk about some conflict resolution mistakes. Then we'll move into effective communication skills. I'll touch on reflective listening, assertive communication. We'll cover I statements, and then I'll give you guys some resources. So what is communication and why is it important? It is nearly impossible to go through a day without the use of communication. Communication is vital in creating and maintaining a relationship, whether it be an intimate relationship, such as with a partner, child, or a friend, or a professional relationship such as a coworker, supervisor, or client. Your communication skills affect how you solve problems, how you resolve conflict, and the level of trust you generate in your relationships. A lack of communication may result in confusion, misunderstandings, and the development of poor communication patterns. Effective communication is more than just exchanging information. It's also about understanding the emotion and intention behind information. A part as being able to clearly convey a message, you need to also listen in a way that gains the full meaning of what's being said and makes the other person feel heard and understood. Effective communication helps you to avoid misunderstandings at work and also helps you to express what you want and allows for deeper connections with other people in your life. And we have a quote here that says, communication, the key connection to the human connection is the key to personal and career success. So communication is so important. As I said, we're doing it every day in all different capacities, at work, at home, personal relationships, professional relationships. So it's very important that we're mindful about how we're communicating with others and making sure that we are being as effective as we can be. So what gets in the way of us communicating with others in an effective manner? I thought it'd be good if we started by talking about the barriers to effective communication, because a lot of times we may not realize that we're making these mistakes that are hindering us from being able to have healthy communication in our relationships. So there are many barriers to communication that I want to take some time and discuss. So I'll just be covering the most common barriers that cause disagreements, arguments, and misunderstandings. The first is poor listening skills. They say the biggest mistake that we all make when communicating is we listen to respond instead of listening to understand. Many people consider speaking as the most important element of communication. However, good listening skills are found to be most critical to effective communication. Good listening skills help you better understand the information other people are trying to convey, also improves your rapport with others, and improves your problem-solving skills. So I know we might think, oh, listening, that's easy, but you'd be surprised at how many times we are failing at just providing good listening skills to the other person. The next is emotional barriers. So what does this mean? There's a great potential for misunderstandings when emotions are involved. Emotions aren't necessarily a negative thing when communicating, but when they affect the way that we communicate is when the problems happen. When you're emotionally overwhelmed, you're more likely to send confusing or off-putting nonverbal signals or misread other people. An example would be A sender, which would be a person who is initiating the communication, who is angry or upset, may not be able to effectively communicate their feelings or ideas in a calm manner. Similarly, a receiver in a similar state may ignore or distort what the other is saying. So we do have to be mindful about our emotions when we're trying to communicate. The next is timing barriers. So the timing of communication can affect its ability to be understood. For example, there may not be enough time to communicate the message fully, or it may be too early or too late in the day for someone to give the communication their full attention. I think that this is important to point out because it often gets overlooked. We don't want to save an important conversation for the end of a long day when a person is taxed and checked out. We are most likely going to be met with someone that's defensive and frustrated due to the other circumstances of the day. So just, again, be mindful of the timing. Next is perceptual barriers. Also a very important barrier that is often overlooked. Every person experiences events, which include communication, in a way that is unique to them. So a sender will communicate in a way that makes sense to his or her own reality, and a receiver understands communication in a similar manner. However, these two realities may not be the same. So the message may be perceived differently, hindering their communication. Some variables to be mindful of include age, education, gender, social and economic status, cultural background, temperament, health, religion, political beliefs. All these things can alter perceptions and create barriers for communication. The next one is filtering. So think of it as the child's game of telephone, where a message is passed from one person to another. And in most cases, when the message is finally received, it's very different from the one that was originally sent. So that's what filtering is. Filtering occurs in a variety of ways, and it can be a barrier to effective communication. An example could be maybe an assistant, a coworker, or even a spouse might take a message for you on your behalf. However, that message is going to be very different versus hearing it played back on an answering machine from the individual. Next is inconsistent or negative body language. So nonverbal communication should reinforce what's being said, not contradict it. If you're saying one thing but your body is saying something else, the listener will most likely feel like you're not being honest. A common example is yelling or having a raised voice while saying things like, I'm not upset or I'm calm. Even though you're saying those words, your nonverbal is giving something different. Similarly, if you disagree or dislike what's being said, you might use negative body language to rebuff the other person's message. Your arms might be crossed. You may be avoiding eye contact, tapping your feet. You don't have to agree with or even like what's being said, but in order to communicate effectively and not make the other person defensive, it's important to avoid sending negative signals. And the last one is lack of focus. So how is lack of focus a barrier to effective communication? You can't communicate effectively if you're multitasking. If you're checking your phone, planning what to say next, or daydreaming, you're most likely missing the nonverbal cues in the relationship and giving the other person the message that what they have to say is not important, which often triggers more of a conflict. So we often see this happen with couples. One partner may be talking about something that is upsetting or bothersome to them, and the other partner is on their phone. And they may say, oh, I'm paying attention, I'm listening, I hear you. I can do two things at once. And even though they say they're listening, we do have to be real about it, that we cannot give 100% focus to two things at the same time. So just keep that in mind when communicating. And we have a quote here. It says, the single biggest problem in communication is the illusion that it has taken place. So that's why I wanted to start with the barriers, because we might not even realize that we're doing these things and they're getting in the way of us communicating with others in a healthy manner. All right, the next slide is conflict resolution mistakes. So conflict handled effectively can contribute to stronger, deeper relationships and help address ongoing problems and concerns. And on the other hand, unresolved or poorly navigated conflict can damage or even destroy relationships. So I wanted to cover some of the common mistakes that are made when trying to resolve a conflict. And again, these go hand in hand with communication, because in order to resolve a conflict, we have to communicate. So the number one mistake when trying to resolve conflict that is probably the most popular is avoiding conflict altogether. There are a lot of people out there that don't like confrontation, but confrontation does not always have to be a negative thing, because when we confront something, we can bring a resolution, we can find a resolution. So rather than discussing building frustration in a calm and respectful manner, some people don't say anything until they're ready to explode. And usually by that time, it's blurted out in an angry or hurtful way. And I know some might find it as the easier route to just avoid the argument, but it usually causes more stress for both parties because tensions rise, resentments fester, and a much bigger argument eventually results. It's much healthier to address and resolve the conflict when it first comes up. I know a lot of times people will say, I don't let a lot of things get to me. I choose my battles, but sometimes that creates a pattern in your life where you're just allowing every situation to just blow off. And then you notice yourself becoming really irritable, having a short fuse or temper with people, and it's probably because you're not allowing yourself to express how you feel in those moments. So just something to be mindful of. The next mistake is being defensive. So rather than addressing a person's complaints with an objective eye and a willingness to understand the person's point of view, sometimes we can become defensive. We may quickly deny any wrongdoings or work hard to avoid looking at the possibility that we could be contributing to the problem. Denying responsibility may seem to alleviate stress in the short run, but it creates long-term problems when a person doesn't feel listened to and unresolved conflicts continue to grow. So if we're constantly becoming defensive when a person is trying to come to us with any concerns or things that they want to resolve, we're never going to be able to solve anything in a healthy manner. And then it's going to get to the point where the person is no longer going to want to come to us because we're always getting defensive. So you do want to try to be objective, be open-minded, be real with yourself about what role you may have played in the situation. Next is overgeneralizing. When something happens that we don't like, we sometimes have the tendency to blow it out of proportion by making sweeping generalizations. You want to try to avoid starting sentences with you always or you never, as in you always come home late or you never do what I want to do. You got to stop and think about whether or not this is really true, and you also don't want to bring up past conflicts to throw the discussion off topic or stir up the negativity. Doing so stands in the way of true conflict resolution, and it also increases the level of conflict. I know sometimes with the last piece, people think, well, we're already arguing. Let's just get to it. Let's just throw everything out there that's been bothering me. And I could see how a person might think this is the perfect opportunity. Things are already in a crumble, but it's actually not, because you lose focus from what the original issue was. And like it says, like I mentioned, you just create a bigger issue than you started with. Next is being right. So it can be damaging to decide that there's a right and a wrong way to look at things, and that your way of seeing things is always right. When having disagreements in your relationships, don't demand that other people see things the same way. It's not meant to be a personal attack if they have a different opinion. You want to try to look for compromise or agreeing to disagree. And remember that there's not always a right or a wrong, and 2 points of view can be valid even if they're different. Forgetting to listen is next. Some people interrupt, roll their eyes, or rehearse what they're going to say next instead of truly listening and attempting to understand what's being said to them. This keeps you from seeing the other person's point of view and the other person from wanting to see yours. So you don't want to underestimate the importance of really listening and empathizing with the other person. And last on the conflict resolution mistakes is the blame game. Some people handle conflict by criticizing and blaming the other person for the situation. They see admitting any wrongdoings as a weakness or discrediting themselves and avoid it at all costs. So instead of doing that, you really want to try and view conflict as an opportunity to analyze the situation objectively, assess the needs of both parties, and come up with a resolution that helps both people involved. You want to try to be objective. What is going to be the best resolution for everyone involved? For me, for the other person, etc. And then we have a photo here of two people arguing about how many boards there are there. One side is 3, one side is 4, and as you see, they're both correct. But from their sides and their point of views, they don't see that. All right, so what are some effective communication skills? So what are the skills that are most important for effective and healthy communication in all of our relationships? Number 1 at the top of our list is listening. It's only fitting that it's at the top, being that it was also the top barrier that we covered. So listening, again, people might think, I know how to listen, but there are actually specific skills out there to help you become a more effective listener. So listening involves hearing and paying attention to the speaker. However, hearing and effective listening are very different abilities. So some tips to help you become a more effective listener. Again, these are some of the specific skills that you want to keep in mind when listening. First is you want to clear your mind. You want to clear your mind so that you can avoid wandering mentally. You want to be mindful of your internal dialogue, such as focusing on what to say next or reacting to something the other person said or the other issues on your mind. All of these things can distract you from actively listening to what the other person is saying. You also want to focus on what the other person is saying. Try and give them your full attention and listen carefully to what's being said. Think of it as an opportunity to learn something about the other person. So you just want to really try to zone in and focus on the words they're saying, the meaning behind it, and what is the message they're trying to convey to you. You want to try not to interrupt. Allow the other person to speak without interruption until they get to their point. You want to try to use acknowledging responses such as, I see, okay, while they're talking. These encourage others to continue speaking and shows that you're interested in what they have to say. It's okay to ask questions. Don't interrupt, but at an opportune time, clarify anything that seems unclear to you. And when you do respond, you want to respond constructively. You want to let the other person know that you value what they're saying, even if you don't agree, and you want to try to avoid responding negatively. For example, you want to try to avoid criticizing, ridiculing, dismissing, diverting, talking about yourself rather than what the other person has said, or rejecting what the other person is saying. So again, even if you don't agree, you do want to respond constructively. And then I will be sharing in the upcoming slide more on how to practice reflective listening. All right, so the next effective communication skill is paying attention to nonverbal signs. So the way you look, listen, move, and react to the other person tells them more about how you're feeling more than your words will. Nonverbal communication or body language includes your facial expression, body movement, gestures, eye contact, posture, and tone of voice. You can enhance your effective communication by using open body language, so that can be looked at as arms uncrossed, standing with an open stance, and maintaining eye contact. Next is speaking. So speaking, the goal of speaking is to convey a message so that the other person understands it exactly as it's intended. Some strategies to help you sharpen your verbal skills are to first be organized, have an objective in mind, and structure your speaking towards the goal. Think before you speak. You want to present your thoughts or the information in an organized manner. You want to speak so the listener understands. Avoid jargon or overcomplicated terminology. You want to speak in a way that's appropriate for the age and emotional state of the individual. You want to respond, but don't react. Be respectful, calm, positive. If the discussion is escalating into anger, take a short break from it. That is perfectly okay, but it is important to revisit it again at a later time and not just let it go. So you want to agree on a set time to resume the discussion and be sure you follow through. And again, we see this a lot probably in your intimate relationships with family members, friends, or even in a couple, that you're disagreeing, things are getting tense, and there's no point in continuing and allowing it to just blow up into a big ordeal. It's okay to take a break, but you need to agree on the time. Like, let's take a 15-minute break. Let's cool off, gather our thoughts, and revisit this. But again, it's really important that you do revisit it so that it can be resolved. And then when speaking, you want to try to resolve conflicts and not win arguments. If you're unable to come to an agreement, take a break, again, set a time to try again, and try and develop a solution to the problem. But remember, occasionally you might have to agree to disagree. And the last one is assert yourself. So direct assertive expression makes for clear communication and can help boost your self-esteem and decision-making skills. Being assertive means expressing your thoughts, your feelings, and needs in an open and honest way, while also standing up for yourself and respecting others. It does not mean being hostile, aggressive, or demanding. Effective communication is always about understanding the other person, not about winning an argument or forcing your opinion on others. Okay. So reflective listening. Since listening is one of the top ways to have effective communication, I thought it would be helpful to show you all an example of reflective listening. So the definition, reflective listening is a communication strategy involving two key steps. First, seeking to understand the speaker's idea, and then offering the idea back to the speaker in order to confirm the idea that the idea has been understood correctly. So reflective listening, I have some samples here on ways that you can start the opening conversation when you are practicing reflective listening. So things like, I'd like to talk about when. So what I'm hearing you say is, this is probably the most common one, yes, but that's not quite right about. So you're saying that, again, you're trying to start the conversation or the sentence in an open manner to allow for clarification. So then if you are putting it out there, so what I'm hearing you say is X, Y, and Z, the other person has an opportunity to either say, yes, that is what I'm trying to say, or no, it sounds like you misunderstood me, this is what I was trying to say. So it's a great skill. It does take practice, but these are some good ideas just to get you started. All right, and assertive communication. I did want to give some examples of effective ways to communicate or speak. And assertive communication is a communication style that is built on mutual respect. Communicating assertively means that you speak up for yourself while respecting the rights of others. So assertiveness is sometimes confused with aggression. And the differences are assertive behavior promotes mutual respect and results in trust, acceptance, and cooperation, whereas aggressive behavior promotes self-interest at the expense of others and results in hostility, mistrust, disrespect, and obstructiveness. So there's some big differences between the two. So just try to remember that assertiveness is built on mutual respect. It's all about communicating in a clear, confident manner while respecting the rights of everyone else that you're communicating with. So some tips to help you communicate assertively. I know sometimes people say they struggle with being assertive. They say at times they're very passive, meaning that they're letting things slide. They're not speaking up for themselves when somebody does something or says something that bothers them because they don't want to have a conflict. And on the flip side, some people think that they are aggressive communicators, that they're quick to be defensive, They usually are quick to becoming angry, lots of yelling and screaming, and they have a tough time resolving conflicts without behaving in that way. So assertive communication, it's a great skill to really practice and can help you in your relationships. So some tips to help you communicate assertively. First is to use confident, positive body language. Again, make eye contact, smile, maintain an upright, relaxed, open posture with smooth movement. The idea is that your body language will give the message to the other person that you're calm and non-threatening. Next tip for communicating assertively is to verbalize a clear, confident message. Some ways to do so is using I statements. Be specific, be objective, be positive, calm, and consistent. Another tip on ways to be assertive is learn to say no. Use the word no and offer an explanation if you choose to. You do not have to apologize or make up any excuses. So learning to say no, the reason this is important and goes with assertive communication is because it's about setting boundaries. A lot of times people say that they struggle to say no, that they may be having a conversation and they may not agree or want to do what the person is saying, but they can't say no. So a part of being assertive is learning to say no when you want to say no and when it's appropriate. And again, that you don't have to offer an explanation, you don't have to apologize or make excuses. You should be able to get to the point where you can confidently just say, no. All right. Next is to use a firm, pleasant, clear, and audible voice. Again, the idea is that your message is very clear. The person can hear you, they know what you're saying, everything is clear. There's no room for interpretation. Next is state the issue and the outcome you'd like to achieve. And some ways to do so are to stay focused, don't digress or allow the other person to deflect you by digressing into other issues, blame or judgment. Just stay focused, stay on task, on the point that you were trying to make when you started the conversation. Next, you want to validate the other person's feelings and issues. People will be more open if they feel that you're hearing their side. You want to summarize or restate the other person's point of view. This gives them the message that you're listening. And again, same with the reflective listening, when you're summarizing, it also allows for an opportunity for them to clarify anything that you may have misunderstood. And we have a quote down here: assertive communication is a learned skill. The more you practice, the easier it will become and the better you'll be at it. So if you feel like you're struggling at it in the beginning, that's understandable. It's a learned skill. It's something new. It's something that you're not used to doing, so it will take time to get good at it. Okay, so I statements, they are an assertive communication technique. So when constructing an I statement, you do want to be sure that you're focusing on your point of view and your feelings. You want to avoid statements beginning with you. Starting statements with you usually put the other person into defensive mode. So if you're saying, you're so inconsiderate, you're so selfish, it's usually going to start an argument versus, I felt hurt or I felt worried. When using I statements, you want to follow it up with a feeling. You want to focus on the behavior and not on the person. It's the behavior that you did not like, not the individual. So an example, their tone of voice, them yelling at you, focus on those things that they did that upset you and not make character attacks. You want to become familiar with new expressive feelings. Maybe taking some time to look at a list of different expressive feelings if you feel like you don't have a good vocabulary. And also, I statements can be used for positive communication, not just conflicts. So it's just a good skill to know how to do. I do have a sample here on a way to construct an I statement. So it starts with I feel blank, and after the I feel, you state a feeling, and that is it, just a feeling. I feel mad, I feel sad, I feel hurt, I feel scared. Then you state what it is the person did that led you to feel that way, and because. So an example could be, first an example of a blaming or unhealthy way to express yourself. Say there's a situation where you have a friend or a family member who you have not heard from. Maybe you've been trying to contact them and they haven't been contacting you back. So an unhealthy way to address it would be, you never call me, I guess we just don't talk anymore. You know, you're assuming, you're making a pretty big generalization, you never call me, and the other person's most likely going to feel attacked when they hear that. Now, a way to put that into an I statement could be, I feel hurt when you go so long without calling, I'm afraid you don't care. Very different. A person's most likely going to respond very differently to the I statement versus the blaming statement. Okay. All right, so here are some resources. These are different books out there that a lot of people find helpful. How to Talk to Anyone by Liel. It gives you 92 tricks for big success in your relationships. Skill with People by Les Giblin. The book teaches you to master every communication, whether you need to communicate to your boss or just want to clear some stuff up with your family. For couples, this is a very popular book, The 5 Love Languages by Gary Chapman. It explores the importance of understanding not only your own love language, but our family and friends' love language as well. And The Power of Two workbook. It's a workbook that teaches the communication and conflict resolution skills that can enable you to enjoy a great marriage. So if you're interested, you can read more about these resources and see if they would be beneficial to you. And then lastly, we are always here to help at EAS. We have our 2 locations, one in downtown Riverside, the other in the desert, Bermuda Dunes. You can contact us to schedule an appointment by calling us, emailing, and we even have a new texting number available. This webinar will probably be uploaded to our webpage if you do want to refer to it at a later time. And I just want to thank you all so much for your time today, for listening. I hope you found this information helpful, and I hope everyone has a great day.